Okay. Yes, Sir Karen. Please go ahead.
All right. I think as a society we have one second. Yeah, we have a problem with how we assign roles in society, right?
Okay.
I think that's probably the core sort of problem, and it affects both men and women in the end, right?
Right.
So on one hand, you have this culture of kind of like subjugation, where it's almost expected for men in society to almost subjugate women. Our culture of kind of to show them manliness. A culture of men being encouraged into certain behaviors that would almost inevitably lead to violence.
Yes.
So there's this one thing on that one hand where men are trained up in certain ways, to act in certain ways, to believe certain things, to see themselves in a certain way.
Yes.
And what that does is two things. One, it does lead to violence towards women.
Yes.
This notion that a man should subjugate or control a woman. But what it also does is that instances where the man is the victim of violence, people don't take them seriously because they believe that the man should dominate. They believe that the man should subjugate. So to them, it is preposterous to believe that a man would be dominated by a woman because you are the dominator. So it hurts the woman. The woman is a victim of this sort of notion that the man should dominate, but it also hurts the man because the man who is a victim now cannot express his victimhood because he's expected to dominate. So this sort of idea of the interaction between men and women, how men and women should interact with each other in society, I think something we need to address at the core of the issue. Because if we don't address it, if we don't address what those sort of conversations we have, we'll always have the problem stemming out of it.
Yes, definitely. Sir Jameson, your thoughts on this issue?
Bless the Lord, sir. Blessings, everyone.
Yes.
All right. First and foremost, my thoughts. I don't tolerate violence any at all. Secondly, there's an issue in our society where we tend to stigmatize gender-based violence more onto the male side.
Okay.
However, we realize that it happened both ways. But majority of the time is the male figure that is I'm lost for that word right now.
And mainly the main perpetrator.
Right, the main perpetrator, right. Where the focus is placed on. Right. And as Sir Barnett said, you don't hear much about it in the church. Up lately we come to recognize that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of topics, there's a lot of stuff that we don't hear much about in the church. Which I am thinking that these are things that should be discussed. I mean, persons getting saved, coming in from different ethnic backgrounds, stuff that they are used to, and practices that they would have grown up and seen and all of that. So I think it is something that really needs to be addressed so that persons can be acclimatized to the kind of behavior that is expected of them in the church and in society on a whole.
So let me. Good to see you, Lady Natasha. You want to just introduce yourself? Just say your name and either where you work or where you worship or both. If you're comfortable. If not, I know that I'm going to get a silence answer. That's perfectly fine as well. But we want to give everybody an opportunity to just introduce themselves. I see. Okay. But Lady Natasha Williams is in our conversation tonight as well. Let's admit this individual. Okay, so I want to come back to you, Sir Karen, in terms of the, we try to get at causes. And there's this culture, general culture of male dominance, which by itself almost sets up the country for gender-based violence. If the man is supposed to rule his family and rule his house and rule his wife, then it's almost like this is supposed to be the norm. So anything that is going out of whack should be, they have a license almost to deal with that. The question is, how did we get there? How did we get there? The truth is that this is an issue that affects every culture. It is not restricted to the Western culture. It is also the same culture exists in Africa. The same culture exists in Asia, and so we here in Jamaica are not unique in that particular way. So that's just the nature of it. And within the church, the church would have adopted some of that culture. But the challenge that I would probably want to throw out is, we see it in the culture, but we in the church, of course, have the good news, and we have should have an understanding of what the model that God has for gender-based violence. What would be going wrong? We can understand the situation in the world. Nobody has taken an oath to be morally right. Sin is all over the place. But what would be the cause for this kind of a problem in the church? Sir Jameson, let me start with you. Why, shouldn't the church be better at this? What do you think might be going wrong that why we're not dealing with this thing as good in the church as we probably should?
All right, so let me first agree with you. Yes, in truth and in fact, the church should be better at this.
Mm-hmm.
However,
and I'm sorry, in fact, the church currently is better in terms of being better than the world. In terms of statistics, it's not as bad within the church, but there is still a problem within the church as it relates to gender-based violence, because based on what you would have just said, the group, the feedback that I'm getting from you is that it's not talked about very much. And so there are persons who are clearly suffering in silence. And of course, gender-based violence is being perpetuated. This study proves it, so that the conclusion is that it is a problem within the church. So within that context, what do you think is the church not doing right that causes it to be perpetuated? Let's start there first, and then we get back to the wider society.
All right. So all right, and that I will also agree with for the section that you said, it is better in the church. Yes, it is better in the church. However, it does exist. And not as much as in society, but it does. However, in the church, we are accustomed to sorting things out ourselves.
Okay.
And even in recent times, there has been this issue that they are even now looking at in a society that, boy, if there are certain issues within the church, should you actually take it to the police and have certain things dealt with, other than just the elders of the church dealing with it, and most times covering it up, or dealing with it internally and put it aside, either put somebody on probation. When in truth and in fact, this being on probation is not, how should I put it? Maybe a not serious enough punishment for the things that were done, right? So the victim will now look on and think that, boy, look at my plight, and this is how lightly it was being treated. So that is one issue. Then there is this scripture that is saying that brother should not take brother to law. And then persons will use that particular scripture, and even when certain abuse or certain violence that has been be proportional to individuals, whether children, whether the wife, or even to a husband and so forth. As a boy, talk to your leaders and see how they can deal with this situation other than say going to the police or going to seek some external help. Right? So that is also one of the issues. And I am thinking that even this discussion, and I hope that it is really expounded on, should we actually be seeking external help if we find ourselves in situations like that are violent and certain physical abuse and that sort of a stuff. You know, some people think that, boy, if the husband is beating the wife, or vice versa, the wife beating the husband, or sometimes it don't even get to the part where the beating start, but there is always some violent suggestion that you know, you probably brush aside and ignore, but which should be seriously been taken into consideration and being dealt with before it actually get there. Sometimes it actually get there. What do we do as saints? Do we go to the police, have this person arrested, deal with it straight up as the law of the land would allow us you to do, or do we take it to our leaders, sit and have a meeting, the person apologize, and they won't do it again, and 99% of the time, 2 weeks down the line, 3 weeks, it happened again. So I am thinking that we really need to deal with this in a broad and real way, so that persons will know if, let's say if, because I'm hoping that nobody don't really get there, but if it should happen, the best mode, you know, and the route to go to deal with such a situation. Because I'm thinking that in the church, I don't think persons are really aware of the options that they have, other than, say, going to the leaders or so forth. I'm not saying not going to the leaders is wrong, you know, don't get me
right.
I'm not saying not going to the leaders is wrong, but sometimes situation sometimes requires a little more than that. I should say. I'm not saying that going to the leaders and praying about it and all of that, you know, because truth be told, I've known of situations where even the wife complained about certain physical situations that actually took place. Very serious physical situation that took place, and actually tried to seek help from within, and at the end of the day, in herself, felt that it was not dealt with properly, it was not justified, it was not you know, made the right way that it should have been. And as a result of that, she's now apart from her husband, and she's saying that maybe if it had dealt with in a more real way, the necessary help that was given, then it would have been a different result today. But at the end of the day, she thought that she had no choice but just to take away herself.
Yes.
A lot of words, right? She just felt that was the best solution. And to today, they are apart.
Right. So
go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So, well, you know, so I saw that you know, so if that is the culture, you know, that's the way things are being, you know, if the issue is being handled within the church community. What, you know, why is that? I mean, we are not getting a handle. I don't get a sense from what I'm hearing that we have a handle within. So we don't have a handle on it within the wider society, and we'll get there a little bit in a little bit. But we also seem to not have a handle in it within the church. And I want to come back to what you had started with, Sir Andrew, in terms of, okay, when you felt, that the leader should, that you had brought them into the conversation. So Jameson is pointing out a culture where he thinks that the consequences are not significant enough. It's handled internally for a crime that is being committed, because of course gender-based violence is a criminal offense and a crime is being committed in church, but the consequences of the law are not being allowed to brought to bear within the church. So so where are we? What really needs to be done in order to correct this culture? Because this young lady, she felt that if it was dealt with differently, she should have. So how will we get this thing to be dealt with differently? And I'm trying to get at your starting point of leadership. What do you think that leadership could do differently in order to really get a handle on this thing?
All right. Just to before I respond to that, the question I asked before as to why is it in the church in the first place, and I'll say to folks, the church does not exist in a vacuum.
Right.
You could ask them, why is there fornication in the church? Why is there adultery in the church? The fact is, the church consists of human beings, and we're all flawed.
Yes.
And a youngster who grew up in a setting where that's his reality. So he was abused, all right, or he witnessed abuse on a daily basis. He is not suddenly going to change simply because he was baptized in Jesus' name and filled with the Holy Ghost. Where the lying and the backbiting don't stop instantly, that don't stop either. So we have it in the church. But what I find in terms of dealing with the issue, I find a lot of time there's the lack of expertise.
Yes.
All right, most of our pastors are what I consider to be jack of all trades and master of none. All right, there's a lack of, and I've never been to Bible school or anything like that, so I don't know what's the content of the teaching that goes on there. But a lot of churches, the pastors, I would say the leadership, because the deacons usually don't really play much of a role. Normal persons go straight to their pastor. But I don't see at the time, I don't think the pastor is sufficient, is trained in the area to deal with the issue. All right, we have some of the more established churches that will have like a counseling unit with person that are professionally trained to deal with such. But majority of the other churches, especially the smaller churches, they don't have that capacity. And so you are talking to a pastor who really and truly is out of his league. He doesn't understand okay, then the person sitting in front of you is more than just lay hands and pray, because there's a developmental issue in terms of his brain because of what he was exposed to as a child, because of so you don't understand, okay, then there's something wrong with this person in terms of his cognitive, his mental development that might be causing him to be treating his partner in the way that he has been treating the person. And so I think one of the things that needs to be done, I have said one of the things that I love to see is, even if you, the pastor, don't have the expertise, have a kind of network. All right, have a kind of network. Listen, I am not trained in this area, but I know that over that assembly there, they have some trained counselors there. These are persons who are professional counselors. So we're going to form a coalition of sorts, so that if when a situation comes to me that I cannot deal with, then I can always refer to that person to assist with the counseling. We don't have to, at church, and individual church, have to decide, okay, I have to take it on all by myself. All right, if you don't have the skill, you don't have the expertise, because one of these things need serious counseling, and not just I'm going to lay hands and pray and go home and fast for a couple of days and what have you, because that doesn't work. So these persons need serious counseling, and so we have to put in those counseling structures in place. If it means that I'm going to take a member or two and say, listen, I will fund your university fee. I pay your tuition fee for you to go to university, get trained, and then we will employ you as a church. I found out another thing, the church is one person's to work for free. Everybody must volunteer their time and their services. And I just don't see that is possible. All right, we are going to employ you as a professional counselor for the congregation, so that persons can come out at least to help the pastor. So I think some of the stuff that we can put in to alleviate. And as Brother Rogers, James has said, where there are clear-cut breach in terms of the law. All right, I think we kind of, this thing about do not take your brother before the unjust judge, I think we kind of abuse it. All right, we kind of abuse it sometimes. But some things are just not what it is. It's a sexual abuse, because violence is not just box and kick down. I mean, sexual abuse, especially if it has to do with children, those things are to and must be reported to the police. And there's no covering up and having a secret conversation where issues of that nature is concerned. So I just think the process need to reach out. If you can help the individuals, then point them into the direction where they can get the help, or we form, partnerships, coalitions with other groups where the expertise is there, so that the members can get the counseling that they deserve, that they need.
Yes, very, 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 very useful, comments in terms of what, where the gaps are within Christian communities that need to be plugged, and probably the need to not feel averse to to know where when you have limitations, and probably yourself as an elder need to reach out for help in certain circumstances. So I think that is helpful. I want to point out that part of the root cause within church communities is still not a very good understanding as well of the biblical model for gender. We've been doing human sexuality in our Bible studies. What is the role of the man within the home, within the church, within society, vis-a-vis the woman, and deal with this whole issue of how men, women submitting and men ruling, and to actually communicate it the way that it was intended in the scriptures, because we know that the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation was written in a patriarchal culture, just as though we have it now. They had a culture, where men were the head of society and kind of had this dominance. But when, and so the Jewish culture and the Christian culture existed in that culture as well. But when Jesus came, of course, his message, of course, the two greatest commandments, love. In the Old Testament, we know that male and female as genders are equal, but that has not effectively come through, so that we are able to say that women have just the same rights as men within the church. And so we give them less voice, and with less voice, and also how we've communicated submission, it seems to be that submission means that I don't, my husband has the final say, even if I'm being abused. And so from a biblical or doctrinal point of view, we also have not been very effective at communicating a biblical understanding of the gender relations, so that it looks more like Jesus. So I just wanted to add that, and that's something that as elders we would need to take a little bit more time. They will need to, as I agree with you, Sir Andrew, recognize their limitations and be in connection with professionals in different disciplines, whether it is the counselor or whether it's the police when that time comes. But they themselves also need to have a better grasp of what it means to be, what it means for a man to rule his own house, because rule in our culture can have a more derogatory, a more, authoritarian, controlling kind of a connotation that was, that is different from what love allows. So we probably need to reflect differently on how we teach gender relations in church as well. And I wanted to pick up also on the part, Sir Andrew, that you mentioned in terms of how we deal with remaining sin in church. What, you know, when the line gets crossed, you know, so somebody is stealing cookie from the cookie jar is one thing, but somebody committing a crime is one thing. But we seem to treat everything almost, you know, within the church, where, you know, and not be willing to, again, when the law is required to step in, we are averse to doing that.
So Smith,
Yes.
before we even move on to that, I also want to jump in. You mentioned the patriarchal nature of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing that we probably need to look at as well, and I might get myself in trouble, but I noticed, I mean, we talk about gender-based violence. These are females that are mainly the victims.
Right.
But the average church, at least certainly within the apostolic setting, all the leaders are men.
Right.
All right. So I'm asking a female to go and sit down and talk to a man about another man abusing her.
Mm-hmm.
All right. No, and I wonder why my time it goes unreported, because I get that most females will not feel comfortable.
Right.
All right, going to another male to explain, to talk to them about the abuse that they are suffering at home. All right, now some will argue, there are those that will argue and say that, you know, in terms of leadership, you know, it's supposed to be male dominated, and female is not really the place for the female to be a leader, whatever the case might be. All right, but I'm just thinking, I mean, having a female having to go and, for lack of a better word, to report to a group of males about a male that is, especially if that male is a member of the leadership council. All right, what do you do? What does she do then? So her husband, who is a deacon in the church and the assistant pastor, all right, is the one that is abusing her. What does she do?
Right. So this is the result I'm alluding to in terms of how we have traditionally looked biblically at issues of gender. So if we change that and we correct it, then we will know that leadership does not mean that I need to, as the leader, you know, facilitate these kind of conversations. Leadership is not clearly articulated, you know, in the way, again, and in a more robust way that, you know, as the Bible would articulate it, so that leadership can allow for recognizing the sensitivity of issues, allow for the recognition of female leaders. Because again, if it is corrected, we know that Jesus allowed, and even God himself in the Old Testament, in my study, I alluded to Miriam, who was numbered among the 3 individuals who were leading Egypt out of Israel out of Egypt. There were 3, and Miriam, of course, was in fact a proper leader in her own right, and we had a reference for it. We had Deborah, of course, who was a judge over, and people came to her as a judge, just as though they would have come to her as a man. And so we have, you know, representation of women in leadership. And so if we accept that, then we would know now that there are some things that really only a female leader can effectively articulate and respond to. And we would ensure that those structures are within the church communities in order to effectively deal with them. But if the doctrine is wrong, because you know that there are some communities where women are not considered fit to leadership against this biblical principle and permission, and of course it creates the problem that you are alluding to, Sir Andrew, where if all the men are the only leaders in the church, how will women feel safe to have a voice? Also, from a biblical perspective, if we don't correct our teaching, we will not recognize the equality of women in general, so that both male and female within the marriage have a voice and need to be protected by the entire church. And if we don't correct those things, then we're going to have this thing perpetuated. So GD conversation is like a fight. It's like fighting a losing battle, and I can understand that sense of, you know, it's hopelessness, because at this point, to this point, many fellowships really have not yet acceded to this, properly understanding and appreciating the biblical model, again, for such topics as gender relationships, sexuality, because most of our focus, and I think it was Chidi who probably mentioned it as well, who said that if the focus is on the spiritual man, meaning salvation, meaning try to at least stay out of those, common sin, stop stealing and lying and stabbing and shooting, and not recognize some of the more subtle issues and pervasive issues like gender-based violence, again, issues with control and issues with relational issues, then we're always going to have those underlying challenges within the church. So I'll just leave that, those two thoughts there. So if we should put a response, I would say, Sir Andrew, yes, that the elders should really be open to getting professional support and knowing where the boundaries are, where this ends with me. Once you start to behave in this way, it's time for you to get counseling. It's time for you to go and talk to the police, because the church does not go beyond that capacity, right? But it also means that the elders also need to reflect again on the biblical model to see if they really are reflecting and applying the biblical understanding of gender, of marriage, as it is in this particular study, so that women who are equal to men are also equally represented and protected in their faith and in their relationship as well. But I want to shift the conversation. So this is where I think the church is, but of course, what of the society? What of this country? We are putting in laws to try to treat with gender-based violence, but from a social point of view, what is the response? I know that the government now is putting in a law to try to deal with this, but is law sufficient, or is there something else that is needed from a social or cultural perspective in order to respond to the issue of gender-based violence? And any comments on that? What should the general society do in order to respond to gender-based violence in society? Any comments on that? Sir James, is that your hand?
Well, yes, blessings again.
Yes.
Sir, so I think, as I said, persons coming from different ethnic backgrounds, then this come back to parenting.
Yes.
And how we are raised and cultured as individuals coming up. Also, the amount of violence that we are being exposed to as children. I mean, what as children growing up we see happening in our homes, what we think is acceptable, as of what is not. I mean, a child growing up and seeing his father beating on his mother, and the mother just moves on with it. Maybe think that is the norm, and this is how it's supposed to go. A daughter coming up and see this happening to her mother, when she gets old and it happens to her, she might think that, boy, this is also the way it's supposed to go, and it's just the norm.
Yes.
And until we change this sort of a thing from all the way back to 2-3 years old coming up, how the child is raised, the kind of environment, and for us to really see some real change in society, can we do that on a whole in terms of an entire country?
Yes.
Then that is also left to see the behavioral scientists and those persons who conduct these studies will tell you that this is where we need to start from. That is factual, and I would also agree with that, because the way a child is raised does have a lot of impact when that child is old.
Definitely.
Right? There is also where the church is concerned now. There is also when as Brother Barnett said, and that is what was lingering in my mind too, because it is still people from society that get saved in the church, and people are still people.
Yes.
Right? And there is also a saying, wherever people is, you will find problem, and wherever problem is, when you look there good, you say people. So it is a real one, and I think it needs to be addressed from the grassroots, right? Those in order for you to see a real change in some years down the line, because while you might find it, and then you have the different classes of society in Jamaica just the same, because not that violence is not everywhere at every level, as we have seen it, yes. But at some levels, it seemed to happen a little bit more than at other levels. So somebody who was raised uptown, or quote unquote come off good table, you might find that the issues there is a little less. Not that it doesn't happen, but maybe a little less. As after somebody who was grown up rough cut in the ghetto and seeing this like a daily thing, you know, a girl just being beat up by a boyfriend, or beat up by a husband, or whichever way it goes, just seem to be the norm, and a lot of persons just tend to either turn a blind eye or sort of accept this kind of behavior. You understand? So I am hoping that at the end of the day, that they will be able to, that some changes will be able to be made, and I think it has to start from the younger age coming up. The younger age coming up. There was also a question that was running around in my mind, so let me just get it off as I'm on the floor.
Yes.
What is the church's stance on rape in marriage? Is this thing possible, or is it not? Some people are saying that it's not possible, because it is the husband's right to the wife's body, and her body is not her own. And people will give different reasons and views and stuff where that is concerned, but it is also a form of violence in my eyes. And I mean, no is no, and it doesn't mean that because the wife is supposed to be submitted to the husband, there are times that she can't say no. You know, that's my personal view. I don't know.
Yeah, so sure. So let me pick up on a couple of things, because you know the truth is, and I'm a volunteer crisis counselor with Women Incorporated. You know, so I have, you know, firsthand both experience in terms of when women call, you know, in the middle of the night, because they are being beaten, because they're being abused, and when they call, they either call for counseling or they want to find a refuge. They literally need to escape from that house, or they're going to die. You know, so, and the truth is, Women Inc. is a non-government, it's a volunteer organization, right? Very small. We probably only know, it's only probably in the last 2 years or so that the government has set up these safe homes where they can call in, where a woman can run to in the middle of the night if they meet the criteria and they can get help. But before that, there really was no help for women who are, you know, are being abused, physically abused in these crises. And also remember that in the world, there is a tendency for relationships for women to be in poor relationship. What do I mean? I mean that they are completely supported by the male, so they do not have any capacity of their own. So if they leave the home, they don't have any, they're not working for themselves, they probably also have the children, and they don't have any resources. So therefore they are trapped in those kinds of relationships without any real way to help them if they actually find themselves in this situation. So this is a very, very pervasive problem within society, right? So I'm painting a picture here that, you know, the issue is a dire issue in the country without a reasonable, effective mechanism to respond. So you say, Sir Jameson, that parenting, of course, so you get right to the root of it. The parenting is a very big part of the issue, and this is what perpetuates, you know, boys who are treated in some ways, or boys who are abused, and then they grow up to become adults. But how do you change culture? And parenting is a culture. You know, to try to legislate parenting, you can see a problem with trying to legislate parenting. How do you change culture in a world? What is the mechanism? Because governments have laws, so they can put in a law, you know, well, you know, don't hit the woman or don't hit the child. But how do you enforce a law like that? What really is needed is a change in culture. But what is the mechanism in the society to change culture? Right now, within the church community, at least there is a mechanism where the community in general share the same values. So they share the values of love and they share the values of respect. So at least on paper it is there. And so, you know, fortunately for us within, you know, our community, we, you know, most people are very committed to it. So the levels are low, but they are present. But I want to contrast the dire situation that exists in society, that it's really going to be a headache to really deal with that. And there are not very easy solutions there. Within the church, there are solutions. It is just for the persons who are there to actually hold on to the solution and apply it. And so we probably need to again, you know, choose, as it were, you know, the path that we probably are considering. You know, whether we probably need to be, you know, a part of a healthy church community, at least to reduce the risk, but also when you're a part of a healthy church community, ensure that you're a part of a community that, again, had a proper doctrinal, theological framework that allows for crimes, even in church, to be punished, that allows for a better understanding and conversations about these issues in a way that brings, you know, addresses them rather than to put them under the carpet and to keep them silent, because that perpetuates the problem even more. So I just also wanted to add those two bits regarding society, the problem in society, and regarding where the church is and where the church needs to go as well. Sir Jameson, your question regarding rape in marriage. Let me just say that the problem is that we probably got hung up on the label of rape rather than the issue of a not just a sin but also a crime, right? And the same principles apply, that if a crime is committed, whether it is in marriage or outside of marriage, that the consequences should remain the same. Any form of abuse within, you know, so you have a man who is slapping up his wife, that's a crime. That really is a crime. That's gender-based violence and it's against the law, and that should be treated as a crime. So when individuals, either within the church or outside of the church, cross it, because the standard of the church is very high, so that once you start to see, you get to the point where people are not just sinning in a certain way that church discipline can deal with, but going over the line towards crime. You know, pastors having sex with underage children. You know, those are crimes, and those should be treated as crimes. Until we get to that point, we will not really get to where we ought to be. So if a male whose spouse has decided that, you know, this relationship is not, you know, they're separated, you know, and he feels, but she is bound in the home because economically she's struggling, and he violates her, it's a crime, and she should be able to report that as a crime in some way, so that a consequence can be applied. and it should be as straightforward as that. So that's my 2 cents on that. I don't know if anybody else has any take on that particular question. But I think again that once a crime is committed, whether in church or outside of church, there have to be effective consequences, not just to take it into the office and close door and have a conversation and then hope that it goes away. If a crime is committed, people must be exposed to the consequences in order for change to occur. Anybody else has any thoughts on the issue of rape in marriage, and how the country can move forward in response to violence, and how the church can move forward in violence? Any comments at all, additional comments at all on the topic?
In terms of the violence, sir, so brother, I want to talk about the parenting. The issue that you probably run into in terms of the parenting is that a lot of the parents are unfit. Okay, so you have.
So the question is, how do you, so that's
right? So that's another issue. So what I would love to see is education. Society. That's why it's not. It doesn't happen a lot in this part of the world, but maybe more so in the eastern parts. I mean, they change society through education. So we have to start to now infuse gender-based violence into our school's curriculum. All right, from the basic school level.
Yeah.
All right, right throughout, we have to now start teaching our children, because I gather the adults that are there now, there's not much that can be done to change them again. I mean, some of them, because of all these things has been cultured and rooted and grounded in them, and especially given the fact that a lot of them, the male dominance structure really comes from Bible and scripture. The adults are going to be reluctant, to say the least, to relent. Yeah. So you then have to now focus on the children. Yeah. All right, the very young ones, and start teaching them from basic school. All right, what is gender-based violence, what it looks like, and how we should treat with it. And then by the time they grow older, hopefully it will stick with them. And then they will teach their children, and their children teach their children. And ultimately, we could say, but there's no quick fix. All right, there's no law that we can pass that's going to fix the issue tomorrow. Yeah. All right, so we have to really invest in terms of education, teaching our children, teaching our adults as well. But I think a more concerted effort have to be done. I've always said, a pregnant woman goes to the clinic and she's there from 5 o'clock in the morning for an 8 o'clock clinic. And she's just there sitting down doing nothing. Those are time that can be used for serious education.
Right.
All right. So educate our young people, teach our children, and then hopefully because that's where you're going to change the culture. All right. Over a period of time, once they accept the message, you have to start putting it into. We always complain about the entertainers and the type of songs that they are playing, that they are putting out there. So maybe those the powers that we need to start to pen some songs that will promote the what you want, instead of fighting with them about what they are not singing. Maybe the powers that we need to start to write some songs promoting the kind of attitude and value that you want society to adopt. Yeah. All right, but we have to find somebody to get the message out there, target our children, get it into them that, listen, this kind of behavior is just simply unacceptable. And of course, when you find those that are the perpetrators, I think we must deal with them and deal with them according to the law. I've ventured to say deal with them severely and let it be known, because I said justice must not be done, but it must be seen to be done. All right, so let person know that, listen, this is just simply unacceptable. All right, so we're going to deal with it. Also, we have to move away from what must the government do, or what can government do, what is government doing. It's everybody's business. Yeah. All right, the prime minister is not at your house. It's not the prime minister's neighbor that is beating his wife. It's your neighbor. You see it, you know it's happening, but you have never thought to report it. Because we have this everybody mind there who I don't believe because a cockroach done business in a fall fight mentality. All right, so that's another thing that we have to move away from. Saying, I see it, I'm going to report it. Yeah. I mean, government can't fix everything.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so here's an elephant in the room, and this is where we're probably gonna close off this conversation. So the question is, what of the man them? Because the primary perpetrators in this entire, on this particular issue by far are, of course, are us. And it's a good thing that we have, a good representation of men in this conversation. It's really us that in terms of that education that you talk about, Sir Andrew. How do you get the men both in society and even within the church? Because again, within our community, we have a mechanism. Discipleship is really the mechanism where we educate people on these things. So it's really we have an opportunity to deal with the men, but the problem is with primarily with the men. How do we engage, confront, people like us, and say, listen, this is a problem that we really are the main perpetrators of, and we need to respond to it differently. What is an effective approach towards us? Sir Karen, if you're still hearing us, any comment on this? If we are the problem, how do we, what do we need to do as men? What approach can we take towards confronting us on this issue? Because we can empower the women, but confronting us on this issue and getting some form of movement towards change.
Well, all right. I'll give since a lot was said, I'll just overall view.
Yeah.
One of the main points, I think you were the one who mentioned it, was that there's a lot of situations where the women are economically dependent on the men.
Yes.
That leads to a situation where there's an imbalance of power and the women really have very little leverage in the situation.
Yes.
A primary solution is obviously then the economic liberalization of women. So that would just take it out of the man's hand completely, right? That at that point would change, as opposed to relying on noble men to treat women fairly when they have the power. To make more sense to just give that liberty to women, ensure that they have equal place economically, which is very important. So that's the first point I make. I would also agree with Andrew's point about the importance of media and representation. You would notice that when there's a change in society, is usually driven by the media. So you would see things on television, for better or for worse, that you wouldn't see ordinarily, right? And that kind of drives that change forward. You hear things in songs, in movies. So the representation in media pushing forward a message that does not accept certain behaviors, I think is very important. So media, culture, movies, songs, etc. I think that's very important. But to address directly the issue of men, what is the role of men in stopping other men from committing certain acts? I would say, as things stand, that would probably be very difficult, because if you're being realistic, you're going to have, unless the man is a very close friend of yours, in other situations, you're going to have a very hard time. It's a man who beats his wife black and blue every day to stop doing it, no matter what the circumstances, right? So I think that's a tough kind of uphill battle there, but we still have with as Andrew I think pointed out, with the next generation of men, the young men, and kind of training them in the right values that would prevent situations from reoccurring. I'm not saying that the men who are currently abusers are completely lost, but I think it's a much tougher battle to kind of turn it around and kind of get them on the right side of the issue. But I think it's still important to keep the line open for those men to kind of have the right counseling, perhaps, and the right channels for them to maybe work through their issues. Maybe they're dealing with issues. Maybe they face violence in childhood, so the right counseling. I'm kind of encouraging men in general to be more open about how they feel, to be because if a man experienced abuse when he was a child, a lot of men are uncomfortable to openly admit that they were abused, and that they have trauma, and that they are hurting, and that they feel, they have a hard time coming out and just saying that. So encouraging men to be open about the abuse that they may have faced, open about how they feel, open in their expression, I think would be a good start, because a lot of abusers do have some sort of trauma that they have dealt with, and having the right channels to address that trauma, I think, is important. So that's the summarize, I guess, the economic liberalization of women, represent media, and of course, the culture around how men are able to express their feelings and be open when they need help to say, I have a problem and I need help. I need something and I need help. So
very good. I concur. So I think there is, in wrapping up, there is an opportunity. We can conclude that there is, of course, a problem of gender-based violence both within society and even, and of course within Christian society. I think, of course, that notwithstanding the fact that it is certainly not as prevalent or as bad within Christian or church communities, but it is not being effectively dealt with, and it certainly needs improvement there. And I think there is an opportunity within Christian communities, because they actually have the capacity. Most of the persons who work with the issue, are trying to address the issue within society, are themselves a part of Christian communities. And so at that church, I think we have an opportunity today to get it right and provide ourselves as a model to help society, whether it is through education that Andrew had proposed, as well as the representation in media, some of the songs that we sing and the culture that we have, does not perpetuate violence and that sort of a thing, and education as well. So we do have that mechanism, and the best counselors that are around are also tend to be Christian as well. So I think we have an opportunity to get it together on this particular issue, to be able to impact the world on this very, very, very difficult challenge. As you said, Sir Kieran, it's an uphill task with men. Men in church do actually have mentors through their elder, but even within the eldership, there is a limitation, because the patriarchy tends to be perpetuated there as well. And so among themselves, they need to actually be informed a little bit better on the whole issue, on the whole teaching, and they will be in a better position to mentor these men within the church community, and by extension, we can also impact the wider society in that way. But I think overall, most of us are agreed on the issue and the way forward. And so, the conversations as well are very important to be having, and to let people know that, we, especially the women who are suffering in silence, is that there is an outlet. There is an avenue, that there are persons who are understanding and empathetic with them. They don't need to suffer in silence, because, well, it's my husband and we need to protect the relationship. They need to be educated to understand that, no, once crimes are committed by any means, people should be accountable, and they can be protected. And we really want to help as many persons as possible. So my comment is to continue to have the conversation, especially with persons who you think may be abused, and share the facts on the problem. Don't pretend that we don't know that it is real. And let's see if we can help somebody along in some small way on this particular issue. Any final comments, any final thoughts from anyone tonight?
Yes, Sir Smith.
Yes.
I'm just then I'm thinking, many of us here are from different church organizations, and I'm just thinking how many individuals from church groups, whether mine or others, would have seen the flyer for this presentation and decided, well, I'm not going to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to if it was announced that is a mission convention or something like that, how many persons would have been in attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Point I'm trying to make is, even within our church community, there's this tendency to shun these issues. And I must commend you, sir, for raising them and discussing them, because that's a start.
Right.
But there's a tendency, all we want to do is to come and jump and dance, swing on the chandelier, speak in tongues and that kind of stuff. But there's more to our existence, and that is good to come to church and fellowship. All right, but we do that and then we hide the real issues. Because I find a person tend to behave as though when everything is good, you know, I just come to church and I sing and I praise God and I'm good, and other persons are hurting. All right, but it's just taboo. There's just too many taboo topics, too many taboo issues in church. And so I commend you for your courage in terms of, okay, let's deal with these issues front on, because persons are faced with them. Some of them will never come forward and say anything in terms of opening up and having a conversation, but hopefully if you're having the conversation, they might hear, maybe not directly from you, maybe from somebody else who would have participated in a conversation. I mean, and hopefully it will give them some kind of hope. But I just think we need to have these kind of conversations going on a much more wider scale. They can't just every time it is just prayer meeting and that is it and everything. So the soul might be saved, yes, but then we are suffering in the physical. We are suffering tremendously. But and help is there, but it's not being realized because we just, you know, it's just taboo.
Yeah.
Well, right. Well said, sir.
Yeah.
You hit the nail right on the head. That is so true. I mean, and I agree with you by commenting, Sir Smith, for actually putting this forward. And I'm really disappointed in the amount of persons here tonight. I mean, I don't know if a lot of persons actually didn't see it, or they actually saw it and decided not to participate. But it is very important, and as you rightly said, maybe if it was some other service, it would have much more participants on it, you know. However, there are real issues in church. I mean, I got saved and in my much younger years, being saved. You know, I thought that it was just, yes, coming to church and attending the prayer meeting and the Bible studies and getting involved in all of these things and whatever. But as I grow old and get to become a little bit more mature in this thing, I realize that there are real issues in church that needs to be dealt with. I mean, you would be surprised to know the amount of hurting people that are actually in church. Hurting people that are in church, you know, and these issues they are so real. I mean, and we really need to get with it to deal with these real issues that are really affecting our saints. You know, it is good to go about the pulpit and say, I'm not gonna pump anybody tonight, but some of the time you don't even realize that these persons they are so burdened down by some of the issues that they are facing that are not being dealt with, and they don't have a voice and they're not coming forward to say it. You know, a lot of persons, most persons won't come forward to say it, in truth and in fact, Sir Barney. So I do commend you, Sir Smith, for bringing this to the forefront, and I hope that we can have even much more discussion and stuff like these, and even other topics just the same too, because I mean, so many things are tabooed in the church, and it's not just about learning about David and Moses and Isaac and Jacob and you know, all of that is good, yes. However, I mean, there are real issues of our day today that will somewhat affect us. I mean, from even making it into the rapture, because hurting people hurt people. That is why we also need to understand that hurting people hurt people. And if you find yourself in a situation like that, then you're going to be in problem of even making it into the kingdom. You know, so
we're having these conversations because I've had the privilege, you know, to be informed a little bit on the, you know, the fact that the good news in fact encompasses, and it's for this very reason why we have a good news. For this very reason why we have a gospel, and it is much broader than we probably have traditionally treated with it. And so we're trying to, to get it to spread as much as we can. So if there's anyone in the conversation who has not yet subscribed to our, so that you can get additional information from these conversations, you can go to our website at agapeapostolic.info and, sign in on the guest page, and you'll be able to get in emails on the conversations, and as well, of course, invite and spread. When you see the links on our social media platform, just repost them so that as many persons as possible become aware, and we try to grow the conversation. The goal is to grow the conversation. The more people are having the conversation, the more people begin to really think through the issues differently, and I think we will be able to make an impact that way. Thank you all for participating in our conversation tonight. Thank you, Sir Heron. Good to hear your voice again. I believe this Galaxy S7 is Tara Wallace. Thank you. If this is you, GD, you've not introduced yourself as yet. But we hope that you will have an introduction one day when you are comfortable. Thank you, Lady Celia, for listening in, and everyone else, all the folks at Agape MCC. God bless you all. Please do have a good night. You can feel free to open your mics and say good night to anybody.
All right, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, all right. Take care.
Blessings. Thank you.
Good.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.